at this point, and I really appreciate you being here. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to talk about myth versus facts around the Eat Less, Move More slogan, which will kind of which will kind of give us and take a deep dive into some other myths that are pervasive in the weight loss world. Because I don't know about you, but I've been hearing a lot of slogans over the years: eat less, move more, calories in, calories out. And what I've noticed is those sayings are not that effective, and they can also be quite detrimental to a person's efforts in trying to get to a more ideal body weight, a more ideal body composition, however you want to view it. Because some of us, maybe we don't need to lose a lot of weight, but maybe we desire a different body composition, a more healthy metabolism, something along those lines. So first I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. And just so you know, I have done a few webinars now, but I'm still a little new to this. So honestly, I am still a little bit nervous. Let's see. All right. So my name is Amy Shouse, Dr. Amy Shouse. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and I have a master's degree in science, and I'm a licensed acupuncturist in the state of California. So that's a little bit about my alphabet soup behind my name. I also have been in practice for 12 years, and I have been doing acupuncture for about 15, and I really have a passion for metabolic health and weight loss. So my story is that, and some of you have already heard this who've been on my previous webinar that I did about immunity, is that I suffered from a lot of ailments starting at the age of 15 with autoimmune disease. And I'm going to sound like a pharma commercial right now, right? It's like autoimmune disease, I had thyroid problems, with a whole long list of issues: palpitations, insomnia, crippling anxiety, hair falling out. And then one of the things that I really struggled with for many years was my body weight and being overweight, and not really knowing what to do or how to proceed, because there was so much information out there, and B, honestly, most of it was not helpful. And I would go down a certain track, try something, and it would maybe work for a little while, but then it stops working, you rebound, or what I started experiencing later, like in my 30s, was really doing all the things and not a lot of progress at all. So I want to show you this next slide. Let's see. That's me. That's me about 7 years ago. So that's kind of what I struggled with for many years. Like my body weight would go up and down, and for a good majority of my life, I was overweight. I really started to discover new information in the past 5 years, because to me, it wasn't necessarily about losing the weight. It was also about health, and it was also about having a consistency to it. Because what we all know is it can be tough to be at a consistent ideal body weight over time. Because time maybe isn't your friend sometimes. As you truck along and you get back into life, and you can no longer count calories, you're no longer going to the gym 5 days a week, or whatever it is. So that's kind of my story. And so today, what I want to do is talk about myths. And we're going to first talk about what is a myth. So a myth is typically an unquestioned belief, or a half truth, or a mixed truth. So a myth really can have some truth to it, or it's a truth that's been truncated, meaning half truth, meaning they're telling you part of the story, but they're not really giving you the bigger picture. And so what I want to bring to the table is an idea around maybe rethinking some of these myths, bringing some more truth to these myths, and definitely questioning what these myths mean, because many of these things have been told to us for so long that they're actually embedded and ingrained culturally that they're almost subconscious at this point. So today we're going to talk about myths, and we're going to talk about truths and what we can do moving forward. So I like to talk about this concept of the balcony of the mind. And whenever I do a series on myths versus facts, which the balcony of the mind really is this idea that you cultivate this area in your mind to take a deep breath, a pause, and to get the bigger picture. Very often in life, and very often right now during quarantine and everything we're going through, we human beings can be naturally emotionally reactive. And that's okay. That's kind of what we are built to do. But kind of just to think about this balcony of the mind, I like to picture it like a balcony. Like I walk out onto the balcony, fresh air, a bigger perspective, sunlight on my face, and mostly just taking a pause to really take in new information. So with a lot of diet information and ways of eating, I hate the word diet, I'll be honest. I just hate that word so much. A lot of ways of eating, prescribed ways of eating, there's so much out there. It's like crazy, right? The first thing people get is confused. Which way do I go? What do I do? Do I do the keto? Do I do the low fat? Where do I go with this thing? And so there's a lot of confusion, and with confusion comes overwhelm. And then also with ways of eating, with dietary advice, we often get this feeling of failure. Like it's a personal character issue. We haven't done it right. We feel like we failed. And when we feel like we failed, we usually then we will usually then give up, and then maybe health suffers more, or we're still in chronic pain because we need to lose that 30 pounds or whatever it is. So my goal is to bring a little bit of clarity to help clear up confusion and overwhelm, and to really address this idea of feelings of failure, because these things create inaction, right? And we want to be in action. We want to be in action right now, especially around what's going on with the circulating virus and immunity as well. So with clarity comes action, and with coaching comes success. So what I offer is a coaching process through making changes that's life-affirming, myth-busting, and based in reality and based in science. So that's kind of the agenda for the day, is to gain some clarity. So first, we're going to start off with the slogan. How many people have heard this? Eat less, move more. How many people have heard this, right? How many people have believed that this was possibly the answer? Right. How many people tried this? I should be raising my hand the whole time. And how often are we successful using this simple slogan? I don't know. For me, I was not consistently successful doing this. So I'm going to kind of talk to you about where this slogan came from. It really came from back in the late 70s. There was something called the McGovern campaign. And so what that was is they created dietary guidelines for the citizens of the United States. And these dietary guidelines were to be used in hospitals and for professionals and clinicians doling out dietary advice. And it was the first time in history that nutrition advice had been sanctioned by the government in a way where it was actually creating guidelines and telling people how to eat. And what this was people need to eat less calories, they need to eat less meat, they need to eat less fat, and they need to exercise more. So that's the slogan. And what I want to also say is, with this slogan, there's two things about this slogan that really get under my skin. Number one, it stops inquiry. It says, we know the cause of weight gain. We unequivocally understand it, and we are no longer going to question what causes weight gain. We're just going to tell you this nice, fancy little slogan to eat less, move more. There you go. Here you go. Bye-bye. Good luck with that. So there's that. And then the second part of this slogan that really bothers me is that it is pretty judgmental. In terms of it, okay, so it's like it implies we know the cause of weight gain. We eat less, move more is the end of the conversation. So it is also has this judgmental sort of thread to it around, I put personal choice in quotes because this slogan really emphasizes your personal choice in what you do, your lifestyle, how much you eat, how much you exercise. But the underlying thread is that eat less implies that you're being a glutton because you're eating too much, right? And move more implies that you're being a sloth and you're not doing what you need to do to exercise. And so I want to kind of get out onto the balcony of the mind and say, hey, maybe this isn't really where it's at. Because I personally, in my experience and what I've seen with a lot of my clients and patients, is this just doesn't work. This just doesn't work. There is a certain degree of personal choice that we have in terms of our dietary choices and all these things. But to completely emphasize this as a character issue is not helpful and is actually, I argue, detrimental to making change. So if you fail at eat less, move more, it is a personal failure. And that kind of gets back to what I talked about in the beginning regarding confusion, overwhelm, and then, okay, I tried things, I quote failed, so it must be something wrong. There must be something wrong with me. So that's the slogan, and the science is the thing they use to justify the slogan. The science is also much too simplified and is not very effective. So what they tell us is calories in, calories out. That's the science. But what I want to say is that, well, first of all, I remember just a story here. When I was in high school and I was struggling with my weight, and I went to see a physician, a very well-meaning physician, right? He was a nice guy. And he said, look, Amy, all you need to do is worry about the calories. He said, you can either eat a big salad or you can eat a bowl of ice cream, but make a choice, but count the calories. And if you have a big bowl of ice cream, that could be your calories for the day or for half the day. And I believed him, but I also kind of felt like that advice wasn't quite the whole picture, because I knew that when I ate a big bowl of ice cream, it made me really hungry an hour or two later. So it just ultimately was not that helpful. It also says that all calories are equal. Calories in, calories out fail. All calories are indeed not equal. we all know that if we eat a piece of chicken versus a cupcake, those two things make us act differently. If you're eating higher protein, not a lot of sugar, you may feel full for longer. You're not going to get a rebound hunger. I know when I eat a cupcake that I feel hungrier throughout the day. I get rebound hunger. I get moody, all of these things. This quote, scientific philosophy of calories in, calories out, also, just like eat less, move more, prevents us from seeking the cause of weight gain, the actual cause of weight gain. Because we have been so indoctrinated in the past 40 years, 50 years around these slogans that we generally take them for truth, but we never really ask, what is actually the cause of weight gain and what is the cause of weight loss resistance? Like when I gain the weight and I don't feel well, or I don't feel that great in my body, you know, and then when I try to lose it, why can't I lose it? So it really stops the just like eat less, move more. It stops the conversation. It gets us away from the balcony of the mind, and it puts us in a place where we're really feeling like we may have committed a character flaw or failure in terms of our efforts. Because I don't know, it's like a lot of well-meaning doctors will tell you to lose weight, to, you know, change your diet, but they don't necessarily have a lot of good advice around actually how to do that. So what I've seen with patients is they get told that, and then they sort of just leave the office and they blame themselves. And also there is a lot of victim blaming around this too, because when clinicians and doctors get frustrated, they sort of throw up their hands and say, well, they're just not eating less and moving more. So there's inherently, this whole system is just sort of inherently not helpful and quite judgmental and actually detrimental to our efforts. So counting calories really is for physicists. It's not for people trying to lose weight. Calories comes from the law of thermodynamics. You know, it's like this complicated scenario philosophy. Let's leave that stuff to the physicists. Let's actually talk about what causes weight gain, what causes weight loss resistance, and stop counting calories. And I will also say this, you know, there was an experiment done. There's been a couple of experiments done in the United States. There was one in the 40s called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. And this is where they took, I think it was 30 men, and they were in college, probably getting paid money to do this. But they gave them a diet of 1,500 calories a day. And they did it over the course of many months. I can't quite recall how long it was, but what they found was that their metabolic rate decreased to meet because they were getting less calories. Their bodies started changing. Their heart rates went down, their body temperatures went down. And you all may have heard this before, right? When you go into, quote, starvation mode. So really what calories in, calories out does is it kind of promotes this starvation mode. So your body matches that caloric deficit, and you just kind of hang out there, and you're no longer, you're not losing, you're maybe losing weight, but your body's also kind of falling apart because it's not getting what it needs. And so when this happens over time, we end up rebounding and just regaining a bunch of weight. So that's another reason why I don't think the calorie counting is the best solution. So let's talk about the real reasons you are gaining weight or you can't lose weight. There are two things going on here. Number one is you're experiencing true hunger. What that means is you're hungry. You're hungry. Like you can't go a few hours without feeling hungry, or maybe you can, but then you get this ravenous hunger. And that's a physiological hunger. I'm talking physiological, not emotional hunger, which is something that's a little bit different, or a lot different. But true hunger is when your body wants more energy. It's asking for more energy. And so you feel hungry. And this will derail weight loss efforts like to no end. People tell me all the time, I tried this, I tried that, or I tried fasting, intermittent fasting, but I just felt so hungry in the morning, or I got so hungry, and so what we kind of want to address is what is causing true hunger, because to be hungry every 2 to 4 hours is not necessarily what our bodies were built to do. It's you know that Snickers commercial where they get hangry. I think do they use the word hangry in that commercial? I don't remember. But like the guy's like turning into like the Hulk because he hasn't eaten in 3 hours, and then he eats a Snickers bar and he's like, oh, I'm fine now, right? It's like, that's not really how your body should be working, and that's a consequence of true hunger. You think about it this way, we normally, evolutionarily, we want to be able to go more hours without eating. And a really good way to picture this is, say we were out hunting, our ancestors were hunting, and they couldn't find food for a couple of days sometimes, maybe longer, but they're not like turning into the Hulk and like gonna fall over onto the ground because they haven't eaten. They actually feel more energy, more mental focus, more mental clarity, all those things you need to catch your prey. So there was no Snickers bar, hundreds of years ago when our ancestors were hunting. So we are actually built to go longer periods of time without eating. There's a trick and a strategy to getting there, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But also, the other reason is hormones. This is what I mean by we're shifting from eat less, move more, and calories in, calories out, to talking about hormones and what's actually causing weight gain, fat storage, and true hunger. So that is a big part of this. And what I will say is, it is key. It is key. So true hunger also is your body cannot burn fat, so your body asks for more food, please. And so this usually means that you have storage, you have padding, you have energy that could be utilized, but for some reason, your body can't open up the cell and burn the fat that it needs. And that goes into hormones. So the major hormone that's responsible for this, and there are actually many hormones, but this is the major hormone that's responsible for this, is insulin. How many people have heard of what insulin is? So insulin is, and it looks like you all have, but insulin is an interesting hormone. It's the fat storage hormone, and it also prevents fat from being released. So normally hormones are pulsatile. All hormones are pulsatile, meaning they come out from a gland in the body and they do their job for a minute or two or a few days, as we know, ladies. And they do their thing, but then they kind of go back, and they go back to where they need to go. And so they're pulsatile, they're in and out. They're not hanging around for a really long time. So one thing about insulin is that when you eat carbohydrates, or when you eat sugar, fruit sugar, grain sugar, potato, any kind, it's either refined carbohydrate or it's whole carbohydrates in nature, your body is going to produce insulin, your pancreas specifically. So what happens is, in the eat less, move more, calories in, calories out model, we've been told to eat grains, to eat every 2 to 4 hours, eat fruit, don't eat too much fat, don't eat too much animal protein. So what happens is people end up in a situation where they have continuous insulin running through their body. The only time the insulin isn't elevated is when they're asleep. So insulin is also the hormone responsible for diabetes. So that's why this is also important, because when you have continuous insulin going all the time, eventually things kind of burn out and that insulin can't push sugar into the cells anymore. And it's no longer pulsatile. It is now continuous. You can't lose weight. You keep gaining. And so that is one of the major reasons for weight loss resistance and weight gain. So what we want to do is we want to man our insulin. We want to mind our insulin. So I'll talk a little bit more about how to do that. Let's see. So, but first of all, I do want to talk about, so there's true hunger, and then there's hormones, and then there is another reason for eating, right? It's stress or emotional eating. And I know this is a thing, and I know that I go through it sometimes, multiple times a week. When the quarantine happened, I was doing a lot of emotional eating. But there's this obesity physician, Dr. Robert Cywis. He's in Florida. He does bariatric surgeries and all this stuff. But what he has this really interesting saying that anything that is not a nutritional event is an emotional event. So anytime you're eating from that emotional place or that stress place, and it's not true hunger or your hormones, promoting hunger, it is an emotional event. And what I want to really drive home with this principle is so first I'll say this. So a lot of times when people start addressing their eating patterns, they talk about, okay, I want to be mindful. I want to be aware of when I'm stress eating. I want to be aware of my emotional eating. I want to be aware of when it's an emotional event and not a true nutritional event. But what I will say right now, and I wholeheartedly believe this, is you cannot address emotional hunger without addressing true hunger and hormones at the same time. And in my clinic, I actually address true hunger and hormones before we even talk about emotional hunger, because nothing will sideline you more than true hunger and hormones affecting your appetite. If you can be aware as aware as you can be about your emotional eating. But if true hunger is coming up every couple hours and you're in that cycle, it's really hard to truly adequately and effectively address emotional eating. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that. Let's see. So another myth, eating fat makes you fat. This is not true, actually. So what I kind of want to dive into is, can anybody think, and you guys can unmute because I want to hear what you think. Can you think of a food in nature that has both sugar and fat? Like a food in nature that has both sugar and fat in pretty abundant amounts.
Avocado.
It's not sugar.
No sugar.
No sugar?
Yeah. It's hard. Like I'll let you think about for a second. It's pretty tough.
Maybe whipped cream?
So cream is high in fat, but there's not a lot of sugar in it
Unless you put it in, right?
unless you put it in. So, because cream is almost like butter, it's like liquid butter, right? Milk has sugar and some fat. We're getting close. Okay. So acorns have sugar and fat. There's two foods in nature that have abundant sugar and fat. One is acorns. What do acorns do? How do acorns serve nature and the animals that live in nature? Anybody?
They help them like fuel essentially for massive hibernation in the winter.
Monica!
This is why we don't eat them, because we don't get to go to bed for 3 months at a time.
Exactly.
Except in
Probably break our
2020.
teeth.
You're on it, Monica. So acorns, they fall at a certain time of year. They're not all year round, and they serve the purpose of fattening up animals for winter. The other food with sugar and fat, you already know because you can see my slide, is mother's milk. What does mother's milk do? It fattens up a baby.
Yeah.
Fattens up a baby. So what you have is you have these two energy sources. There's two energy sources on the planet, period. Fat and carbohydrate. So if you eat a lot of fat, if you eat a ton of fat, yeah, you could gain some weight. If you eat carbohydrate, you could gain some weight. If you eat both together, we call that energy toxicity. So what this leads me into is that fat alone does not cause weight gain most of the time. It's the combination of the two, and what we do in as human beings is we make things like my favorite food is just cupcake, which is a lot of fat and a lot of sugar together all at once, and that's an energy dense food that I still eat sometimes, not as frequently, but I just kind of want to get people thinking about this because not a lot of people have thought about it this way. You know, like what foods we're creating and what energy sources we're putting together. And I'm not saying you have to eat fat only and carbohydrate only all the time, but to really kind of understand the most energy dense foods on the planet. And we love those foods: pizza, cupcakes, potato chips. You know, we love because our brains have wanted to consume carbohydrate and fat because it's a quick energy source, and so we physiologically we're driven towards these foods. It's why they taste so good. So eating fat with sugar makes you fat. That's a more accurate term and way of looking at this. The other thing I wanted to point out, not a lot of people are aware of, is, okay, another question. So, or I'll tell a story and sort of ask a question at the same time. Does that make any sense? So when I sit at dinner and I have a piece of steak or a piece of animal protein and potatoes on my plate, I eat my piece of salmon or steak and I'm like, wow, I feel full. I don't think I could do anymore. And I push my plate aside, but there's that mound of potato on the plate. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I could actually eat some potatoes right now, even though I was just full because I just had that steak. I'm feeling satiated and feeling satisfied. But then I start taking a bite of the potato and I'm like, oh, that tastes good. And then it keeps coming. It keeps going. It keeps going. And there's a reason for that. And that's because protein, when you eat protein, your body stimulates hormones to make you feel full and satiated. And like you don't need any more because protein's a building block. It's actually not an energy source. But when you go eat that carb, literally 3 seconds later, you could eat that whole plate of mashed potatoes and keep going and going because there are zero hormones signaling that you're full. That's the difference between carbohydrates and protein. Is that when you eat protein, you're going to feel full, but nothing's going to stop you. You might get bloated, right? You might get bloated, like your stomach stretching because you're eating more food, but you're not really full. Do you know what I mean? Like the difference? Okay. So the last myth I kind of want to talk about is the myth of the fast metabolism. So this is a thing where, remember, people would say, oh, she's so skinny and she runs around all the time and she's high energy, so she just has a really fast metabolism. I'm not like that. Nobody in my family has a fast metabolism. She's lucky. But actually, it's not that she has a much different, well, her metabolism might be a little bit different from your metabolism in that moment, but actually what she has is an efficient metabolism. And if you have gained weight, you're not feeling well, you're inflamed, all that means is your metabolism isn't acting efficiently right now. Okay, so the point really is that there's not really a tremendous inherent difference between you and the person with the quote fast metabolism. You can actually gain an efficient metabolism just like she does. It's entirely possible. So, and what is an efficient versus an inefficient metabolism? Well, it's kind of like organizing your desktop. Like if you just have a lot of stuff on your computer, things slow down, you get low, your apps don't work as well, your Zoom doesn't work as well. Your computer just has a lot to deal with. And this kind of goes into the insulin thing, the continuous insulin pumping. Your body has to deal with storing energy and utilizing energy in that way over the course of the day. And it doesn't ever really get a break. Because when insulin goes down, your body goes into repair mode and it can bring fat out of storage. And so that's part of creating an efficient metabolism, is reducing insulin. So here's a nice list, but you have an efficient metabolism, you have a lot of mental energy, you have consistent physical energy, your meal frequency is based on healthy hunger, not portion. And I want to be clear here, it's not necessarily portion control. I'm not talking about portions. I'm talking about frequency of meals. And food energy for the efficient metabolism is transformed and used easily. This person is never really hangry. They're more like our ancestors who were out there hunting and not eating a Snickers bar. So for the inefficient person, that would be you maybe have lower energy, you have a lot of energy dips between meals, you have to eat frequently for energy. Your food energy is not being transformed easily, and energy remains in storage. You're frequently hangry, like that guy in the Snickers commercial. So what do we do about this? And let me just check the time. I want to make sure we're on time. Yeah. So what do we do about this? How do we get a more efficient metabolism? Well, we reduce our meal frequency, or specifically our insulin frequency, so that we can start having that pulsatile, normalized, balanced insulin response versus a continuous energy toxic, fat storage, non-fat burning response. So you want to really focus on your insulin frequency, and I'll talk in a minute about how to do that, so you can burn stored fat and balance that hormone. So again, I know I'm talking a lot about insulin, but I just want to drive it home. The number one fat storage hormone, and it prevents fat from being taken out of storage. So when it's low, what happens? It's not storing fat, and then another hormone comes on. It's called glucagon. I'll talk about that in another webinar, but that's like the seesaw. Insulin goes down, glucagon goes up, You're now fat burning. You're fat burning. Oh, and when you're fat burning, you are now utilizing, you're cannibalizing yourself. That sounds weird, but what I mean is you're actually eating your stored body fat. Your body's using it. So guess what happens over time? You can go longer periods of time without food, and you're not feeling hungry because your body's actually getting energy from that stored fat. So weight loss resistance and weight gain is about not being able to access stored fat, and you're also hungry because you continuously can't access stored fat. It's a true hunger. This is not a game about willpower or character or I just, that's just not for me. Sometimes I say willpower, I'm just gonna say it. Willpower is kind of bullshit. Like, let's leave our willpower to save a drowning baby. Let's leave our willpower to climb Mount Everest. Let's not use it to have to overcome true hunger and a hormone imbalance, which is the root cause of actual weight gain and weight loss resistance. So one of the first strategies to reduce insulin, these are simple things. These are simple things, like just to start with, because it kind of sounds intimidating to, okay, she's telling me to reduce my eating frequency, not portions, not calories, but eating frequency. And so what I like to have people do is to reduce or pretty much eliminate their carbs and any sugars, including fruit sugars, bananas, and any kind of sugar, whether refined or not, at breakfast. Just start with breakfast. Do a healthy fat, high protein breakfast, and that will start your day in a very good way because you're low insulin and you're getting, usually people feel pretty satiated. When you eat a waffle and like an hour later you're hungry? Anybody? Right? When you eat protein and healthy fat, like this morning I had 3 sunny side up eggs, a little bit of ghee. I cooked them in ghee, and I sprinkled a little sauerkraut on there. I'm not, maybe that's not for everybody, but that's my protein fat breakfast when I break my fast. And then so that leaves me full, satiated. Remember, protein stimulates satiety hormones, the feel full hormones, right? Carb doesn't. So that leaves me feeling full I'm getting more time, I'm getting more leverage out of it. I'm lowering insulin, and then I can have what I want later in the day, at lunch, at dinner, but just starting with that simple, low carb breakfast. So the other thing is to fill up on protein. This is going to be a little redundant, but and again, start with breakfast. You don't have to start doing high fat, high protein meals all day long. Just start with breakfast, and then once you do this for a while, you will notice you're getting less hungry, you're getting less frequent hunger pangs. But so people are often like, well, what do I eat for breakfast, Amy? Because I normally have oatmeal, and you guys have heard me some of you have heard me talk about oatmeal and bananas. Normally I eat oatmeal and a banana, or I do a smoothie with half a banana, and I get so sick of eggs. I get really tired of eggs, Amy. I just don't want to do eggs every morning, So what I tell people is you really want to rethink breakfast, like start thinking about breakfast, like start thinking about lunch and dinner for breakfast. And meaning like have a salmon steak, have a hamburger, grass-fed hamburger patty. If you don't want to do that, have a turkey patty with avocado. That's probably one of the best breakfasts you can have, is like a grass-fed healthy hamburger with avocado. You are going to feel full for hours. So increase fats and protein as you lower your carbohydrate, because eventually we kind of want to lower carbohydrate for another meal. Like we lower carbohydrate for lunch, we lower carbohydrate for dinner, usually not both. We start with breakfast and we work our way into the process of this. Because what I'm doing here is I'm addressing your physiological hunger, your true hunger, and your hormones at the same time so that you can have more success. So there's one more strategy that I use in my clinic. How many of you guys have heard of intermittent fasting? Okay. How many of you have tried it? How many of you say it didn't work for me? Some people tell me a lot. Well, it didn't work for me. I tried that. So what I do is I ease people into fasting, into a fasting regimen. Regimen sounds so military-like. That's not really what I mean. Is that I ease them into what works for them. Because there's all kinds of different ways of fasting. And fasting is the ultimate low insulin, high glucagon state. So fasting is a really, really great tool to work into that you can take out of your back pocket. You can use it at any time. Eventually, you want to get to a place where you're comfortable with it. It's sort of like exercising. Like you don't just run a marathon on day one. You start going to the gym or you take a walk. So I like to ease people into fasting, and I like to do it in a way that addresses their lifestyle. Not everybody wants to skip breakfast. Not everybody wants to skip dinner. So it really depends on how your values, some people, I want to have dinner with my family, or I want to, whatever's important to them, because there's many, many, many ways to do this. You'll see this list: intermittent, alternate day, eat stop. There's all these names for them: warrior, extended. And really you want to find what works for you in the beginning, and then get a groove eventually in doing more fasts for what works for you. So again, I'm just going to end with this slide, which when calorie reduction is primary, and it's also that eat less, move more philosophy is personal. They try to tell you it's your personal choice and it's your behavior that's the problem, and that you're eating too much and you're exercising too little, and it's creating obesity or it's creating a weight gain problem. But I'm here to tell you, absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. There's another way, and we can work in a way that works for you and where you're feeling good and is consistent for your goals. So the last thing I'll say is I also want to extend and offer to everybody, which is a 30-minute free consultation to be done. We can do a care call over Zoom if you want to talk about this stuff further. And that's a little invite for you for coming to the webinar. I'd love to see all of you and answer any questions. But also I'll answer questions now if anybody has some questions. Oh, and Judy put the link to schedule in the chat box. Thanks, Judy. I went over a lot, so just let me know.
I mean, I have a question, and this one might be redundant because I know carbs equals sugar, right? Body processes carbs into sugar. But if eating fat and sugar are a no, then I'm assuming eating fat and carbs is a no, and eating carbs and more sugar on top of that is also a no, right?
Right. So it's anytime fat and carbohydrate are at high amounts mixed into a food, that's more of your processed stuff, right? That's cupcake, pizza, whatever. But also I really like people to utilize eventually the fasting, because there's not going to be, you're not going to avoid the sugar fat your whole life. And sometimes you want a cupcake, right? So it's like there's all the strategies built around how to do this in a way that kind of works for you, so you're not having to be deprived of social events and all those things that happen in life that we want to enjoy. So did I answer your question, Monica? Did that
Yeah, it
make-
makes sense. Yeah. And then it's like if you run around eating carbs all the time with no fat, you're hungry all the time because you're
That's
just,
exactly right.
you know,
Right. So that's why the low fat for many, sometimes low fat does work for some people. I don't want to bash it like it doesn't work, but I think a long-term strategy, if you're just eating you're just gonna be more hungry because you're lower, because when you lower fat, you have to increase carb naturally because you need an energy source. Because protein isn't really the energy source. It's either fat or carb that our bodies need to burn for fuel.
mhm.
So if I'm going to make a choice, like for me, my choice has been low carb, higher fat and protein. Because honestly, like it's just tastier.
Mhm.
It just tastes better. Low fat food doesn't taste good. At least to me, it doesn't.
So Amy,
Yeah.
back when I was just a little bit younger, I wanted to lose weight effectively. I did a program where I counted not only my calories, but I counted how much fat intake was coming in, how much protein, how much carbohydrate. And
Yeah.
I limited myself to 500 calories for 4 meals a day. So I
Yeah.
kind of switched it up to breakfast, an early lunch, a late lunch, and then dinner. And it really worked. Like in about a month, I could lose like 10 pounds. Does that fit into one of your programs that you put on the list there? Is that
Yes.
what I was doing?
Tell me that again. You were counting you were tracking your your macros, your protein, your carb, your fat.
Right, trying to make more protein and less, less carb and fat.
Yeah.
And I counted the calories too. Literally, I would like put it out there and like, okay, there's the broccoli, that's so many calories, so many this. There's the steak, there's this, that, and that. And, even when I go to a restaurant, I kind of ask them, it's like, how do they cook it in the kitchen? Did they use olive oil? Did they use greasing?
And you did that 4 days a week?
I did that for a month, and I would have 4 meals a day and try to limit it to like 500 calories per meal, 2,000 calories per day.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so that can be effective. But what I would say is, was that effective forever?
It was when I had the consciousness of what I was eating from
Yeah.
moving beyond that. And so it made a difference when I was younger because,
Yeah.
not that much because when I was in my 40s, I could finally see my six pack. It was like, man, that was motivation to like keep it
That's
up. So it's like I've kind of slipped from that. There's a little bit of stuff hanging over the belt now. And but whenever it got to that point, I would use that several times to just like click it in and get a little more serious to get it back in there before I can feel comfortable with maintaining it without such a regimented inventory.
Right, so you're kind of using it as a reset, and I also would say really good that you had protein on board, because that was
Yeah.
probably helping keep you full throughout the day. And because the fact is, I talked about calorie restriction not working, but it can work in that context where you're feeling full and you're getting the energy you need. But I worry about it being a long-term strategy. You know what I mean? Because most of us can't gain that. That's the only thing.
Yeah, and I found myself like eating a third meal like at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon was like I felt like I was forcing myself to eat.
Oh yeah, yeah, got it.
I think we have time for one more question, one more comment. Yes, Charlene.
I have a question about chicken breasts versus chicken thighs and skin, with skin, without skin. What's your preference on chicken?
So chicken, because I lean I lean away from low fat
Mm-hmm.
and more towards higher fat and protein. But you kind of have to make the choice, right? Like, are you doing low fat or are you doing lower carb? Like
Right.
either one works, but if you're gonna do higher fat, you might as well have chicken thighs. To me, they're just tastier. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And chicken with the skin on, you're also getting other nutrients from the skin, glycine, collagen, all these other nutrients. So the only thing I would say is overall is to try to get pasture raised chickens, because this is a whole other topic, but a lot of chicken is high in seed oils. So, but to your question, if you're going to kind of choose to lower carbohydrate, lower fat, or lower sugar, then you want to do higher fat. You want to feel satiated, because fat, although protein signals that satiety hormone, so does fat, just not as much as protein. And you need the fat, right? So you have carbohydrates as an energy source or fat. You're choosing one or the other essentially for at least one meal a day. So if you're choosing fat, then go with fat. Tastes better.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Amy. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I put the link
so much.
in the chat.
Great.
Do sign up for a 30-minute complimentary care call and get your specific situation addressed.
Awesome, you guys. I really appreciate you coming and